So I get to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're actually doing with Direct and the technologies behind Direct now, and try to put a little bit of a different spin on it. There's a lot of hard work going on with Direct Trust and others right now against these base use cases. But we've been able to do a lot of really interesting things in parallel. So my name's Sean Nolan. I actually run a team at Microsoft called HealthVault. What HealthVault does is try to create a system and a service, a central place where individuals and people can actually manage their health information, be a hub between providers that may have difficulty communicating, and actually exchange and manage their information with families and others in ways that aren't always easy to do today. And it's an interesting and challenging job, and one which I hope Direct will actually make a lot easier. First thing I wanted to say was happy second birthday to Direct. That actually, a little picture over there with Dr. Mike and Laura and Gary and myself, was the very first ever live demonstration of Direct, which happened not here, but within about 20 miles of here, maybe even less, at the 2010 Redwood deal. And I'm always super excited to do anything that involves Will, because he actually does things. They get done. And this was really a neat time. It was before we had been, really ONC and HHS launched Direct in February. It was almost a year later. But we were really pushing and moving and trying to get this stuff to work, and it just was a super exciting time. And since then, it has been a while. And all the work that David and Direct Trust is doing, and we're doing, feels slow. And I am not a patient guy. People who know me, I get crabby. But if we step back a little bit, we're looking at pretty amazing progress, actually. Even as we start to build this stuff out, 30 states actually implemented in live, another 12 in pilot. That's changing all the time. And from a patient perspective with HealthVault, which is where I spend so much of my time, we have 24 different organizations using Direct today to share information out of the walls of their organization to those folks. We have another more than 75 of them that are at various stages of testing and working in integration with us. The kind of cool thing about all that is, inclusive of the work that was done here for the various demos that are actually running against HealthVault, is my team doesn't have to keep re-implementing stuff again and again. We actually have a framework that we can use to actually start to engage with more and more and more people, and it becomes a conversation about trust, and it becomes a conversation about a workflow, and not about, boy, how do we even get these bits to move? I thought I'd give you a really quick view at what it means to have direct address in HealthVault. So I have one. Anybody who signs up for HealthVault has a direct address. I stole mine early. It's sean@direct.healthvault.com. And in many ways, it looks like a mailbox. It looks like a web mailbox that you might have, but it has some really interesting properties to it. When structured information is received, like a CCD or consolidated CDA document, we recognize that and we extract out the individual items and make it part of that person's health record. If it includes images, those become part of the record. They can share that with their families and their patients, or their loved ones. And so they can actually use this information in a really kind of interesting way, and I'll talk more about that. But it starts very simply for them. So let's step back a little bit here and talk about why I think it is so special. And that's really that while we can do the work to get to global or national or ubiquitous exchange, there's an incredible number of things that you can do with Direct now. And I would say one of the most great things about a piece of technology is when it gets abused. And people are abusing Direct really well, which means it's working. And the key to that is that you set up one time, you do work, and it's painful work, big IT work, opening ports and firewalls and audits and servers and junk like that. But once you've got it, you can use it in a lot of different ways. And it creates an infinite set of different use cases. We get really hung up and we talk a lot about I'm sending one message sort of as a referral case from one to the next, and that's super important. But we do lab result sharing, we do information sharing, we do all kinds of things with this pipe that now is a ubiquitous thing for us. And that involves a lot of different things. When you talk about trust, we want to get to national trust. But boy, if I have a situation where maybe I'm a researcher and I want to collaborate with a small group, or I want to do something that's very focused. I want a private HIE and I only want to exchange within that space. The same infrastructure, not just the same sort of a copy of the same servers, the same ports, the same addresses, can actually be used with just a little bit of configuration that doesn't have to involve a bunch of IT work. So it can scale up and down. It can handle structured information and unstructured information, and information that it hasn't seen before, random attachments. Maybe we're going to start sending CDISC files for clinical trials. Direct doesn't care. It'll ship anything, and as long as both sides understand that, it can actually make valuable use out of that stuff. And that's kind of interesting in a lot of ways, that it actually can be a blended model. We think about something, we actually looked at, there's a project going on right now called Query Health, which is about distributed queries. And one model of that says, boy, you know, a tough thing about this problem is that different people who might respond to these distributed queries have different capabilities. Some are small, and they might be fine getting an email that says, can you kind of go do a query in your HR and tell me how many diabetics you had last month? Whereas somebody else, that's crazy. At Kaiser, that'd be nuts to try to do that stuff. But the same message in the same pipe can carry that message and be responded to in different ways. So you get this really neat kind of capability. And then the last thing really is that, and I talked about how content independent it is, it'll carry anything. So this adds up to a really nice toy for the toy chest of the geeks of us in the world, and we're starting to see it really get used. And I made this, and I was a little punchy, and I will say there's a new slogan, I guess, over at ONC, which is putting the I in health IT. And I made myself a new logo, which is all about using your infrastructure again and again, which is taking IT out of health IT. And I did, you know, but see, I'm totally going to give it to you. It's all yours, Claudia. But I would tell a little story, which is really, you know, kind of neat, which is these, and this is as Microsoft, this is sort of corporate lore to us, is what did Excel and Access do to big IT, right? It used to be that if you wanted to know how many sales you had in a quarter, or what your users were doing, or anything like that, you went to the accounting department. And the accounting department had a huge mainframe if you were lucky, or maybe they had like a book, and they asked you a question, and months later, maybe you got something that was wrong, and you'd try again. And then this thing called 123 came around. And that started to change the world, and things happened. And then Excel came along, and it put that power in the hands of individual peoples at their desk who were the information workers who knew the right question to ask and knew what they would do with it when they got an answer, right? And that dramatically changed the way and the speed with which we can actually make decisions in commerce, in everything we do. If you think about how often we have Excel. Now, people complain about Excel. Oh, it's kind of a pain, and that's great. It's true. We find places where we can do better, but boy, what an incredible productivity asset to the world. Access is the same way. In my other life, which I had until about a month ago when the joint venture with Microsoft and GE was formed, we have a business intelligence product. And business intelligence is a big IT process. I have, especially in a healthcare organization, I've got a big clinical data repository, and when I need a report, I go to the reporting people and I ask questions. Or if I need to actually build a little database so that I can do something special in my practice. Over at Seattle Children's, where I do a lot of work, they have the craniofacial practice. In the craniofacial practice, they use JPEG images, and they use descriptors about the face that aren't in any EHR, and they're taking years to get into their EHRs. They just want a little database, right? Well, ask the IT department, many, many months, maybe years, maybe never, install Access on your desktop, you have it in the next day, right? I think about Direct the same way. Now, of course, those Access databases aren't backed up and probably end up on a laptop in a car, and there's lots of bad sides to that. That's why we actually had another product, but it's okay. But Direct, I think about it very much the same way. When we've wanted to do projects, we set up, you can imagine the Microsoft infrastructure. I have layers upon layers upon layers to open a port to my servers. And I have layers upon layers to acquire a new server. And they all are audited, and they all are managed. But once we've got our Direct infrastructure in place, we've done a ton of fascinating things with it without ever having to go back to that world. So here's one, and here's my favorite example of all, which was what happened when Google decided to shut down their service. And I always do cringe a little bit. I I loved the Google Health team. I swear to God I did. They were really wonderful people. And frankly, it was bad for my business when they went out of business. But they had to do something. They had made promises to their users. And they didn't really have a lot of options. We noticed one day that they had installed a Google Trust anchor on our test site. And we're like, what the heck is Google doing sending us messages? And we were sort of thinking about it, and about a week later, we got a call from, or I got an email rather, from Aaron over there, and he said, you know what, we're gonna shut down our service, and we think the best way we can possibly get those users served is by giving them the option of going to another service. And direct is a really great option for us, because you know what? Surgery isn't really great about us putting Microsoft on our websites. But direct is something where we can actually send vendor neutral. There's other places we can send, we can do that too, and we can actually come together and do something really great for people. And we took thousands and thousands and thousands of people that would have had stranded information. Thank you very much for making me not believe in these services again, and have a great experience with one click, came through the direct pipe. Zero work on my end. That's a lie. There was a little work on my end because they had some really big files, so I had to do a little work. That was it. Other thing that we did in terms of things that are unusual, Crame Stay Well. Again, really we didn't have a lot of conversation about this until it was done. But they said, we deliver patient education on paper. It's really great stuff. It's customized. The doctor goes to a station and they can customize the diagnoses. They can understand the gender, the age of the people, and it creates this great packet for them. But it's on paper, and it gets lost, and it can't be shared very easily, and it just doesn't work that well. Well, guess what? If you send that via direct, it lives in that personal health record forever, and it just inherits a lot of great characteristics. I can share it with my family. I can keep it forever. I can associate it with other parts of my record when it's important. And I can go back to it again and again when I've forgotten what my doctor told me before. Totally cool stuff. And so I'm going to close, but just to say why I have spent so much of our time on direct. It's about the fact that we can get these things done. Everything we do, my challenge is really not, can we do great things for patients and citizens and people? I know we can, I do it, we see it, it's really exciting and compelling. But not many people have access to the information to kickstart those experiences that are about, hey, I'm moving and I need to take my information with me. Or I want to talk to my doctor about things that are happening in the 99% of the time that I'm not at their office. I want them to see my glucose readings. I want to be able to know that when I've had when I've gone for my annual exam and he updated my medication regimen and I end up in a bicycle accident, my emergency profile is updated with the right meds, not the ones that I had last year, right? All these things, and then I get really excited about things that probably won't happen for a while, but will happen, like citizens participating in research and being able to say, yeah, I care about my data being used in a way to maybe do things like find the Vioxx problem faster than we were able to find it before because everybody in the country is able to see adverse events more quickly. Opted in, only what they want to share, but what we found is people want to share when they see those kind of results. And I think direct is actually an incredible accelerant to that for us, and I'm both on the hard work of getting the world together in an all-up network, as well as using it in some of these neat ways is pretty fun. And I'm looking forward to, hope we have a lot of good questions. We'll see and go from there. So, Will, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks a lot, Sean and David. All right, this is Q&A time. I'm going to ask anybody who has a question to step up to the mics in the aisles. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and pose a question first for David, and that is about, can you take us through the a likely roadmap, this is not necessarily the roadmap, for directtrust.org as it begins the validation, accreditation, whatever the value proposition is, roadmap?
Sure, I'd be glad to. The way we're thinking about this now, given the evolving and early state of this industry, as health internet service providers come to the market and as they are just beginning to partner with certificate authorities and they are in turn communicating with and negotiating with EHRs, is to start with a self-attestation checklist that will allow a HISP, a HISP-CA, a HISP-CA-RA, or any one of those to become accredited with respect to the security and trust components of the work that they do. So let me give you an example. If a HISP, like let's say Cerner Corporation, which is not only becoming a health internet service provider, but is also mounting its own certificate authority and which is willing to act as a registration authority for its clients, is accredited, they will have approximately, I don't know what it'll turn out to be, but it will probably be 75 to 80 checklist items that they need to check off in order to receive, quote, provisional accreditation and be recognized on the directtrust.org website and ENAC. The value proposition there is that it's completely transparent. Everybody knows what those checklist items are. Some of them come from the industry, some of them come from the federal government. ONC has just set a core of interoperability guidelines, which will be a subset of those. On the other hand, if an entity is simply a certificate authority, not simply a certificate authority, but that's what they do, that's their business, and they are interacting with other entities, registration authorities, and HISPs, they will be able to accredit themselves again in a self-attestation manner. I think we have to be very respectful of the needs of the industry and in doing this and sort of start out slow and crawl before we can run. I think we also have to be very respectful of the fact that ONC is in rulemaking mode and some of these things are going to change over the next year or so. But what we're being told by folks around the country and members of directtrust.org is that the sooner you can get this done, the better, because there's a considerable amount of confusion around the definitions and roles and responsibilities and this set of criteria that we think is doable in the near term. How's that?
Great, great. Let's go to John.
I'm John Odden and with Collaborative for Universal Health, and for the question that I'm going to ask today, I've got two props. You'll see that both props are masked by a brand cloaking device so that we won't get into any of that stuff. And I got
mine too.
Say what?
I got my Windows phone here.
How do you know that's not
So do I, and it says in this venue it can't pull up HealthVault.
Sure it can.
Mine can't. I'll be seeking help later at the cocktail hour. But I'm gonna pose an example for you, which I think is based on one of the most taxing examples faced by the population of the United States today, which is taxes. Honestly, I don't give a fig about the tax code. I personally use TurboTax. Others use TaxCut. People sit down and use the tool without needing to know the regs, get their job done, and get their refund, and it just kind of works. And people who don't want to deal with that pay someone to do it for them. Cool. So what can the body here say to you all so that we can get past being worried about the gobbledygook and just let the consumer have their health data at those times and places when it's important, regardless of what they choose to hold in their hand with the brand cloaked so as not to offend anyone? Or what can we do so that we can just, make the stuff accessible to the nurse or doctor I'm sitting with so that they've got it? I would support that as long as we're in the land where the regulations are more important than getting the job done, that we'll applaud you and we'll be glad that you're out there doing the work of digging around in the land of rules and regs. But clearly the population, as far as I can tell, is just ready to have at it. And what can we do to shift the dialogue more towards, let's let the people have at it, the doctors, the nurses, the other clinicians, and the patients. You guys could just be like TurboTax. I love them, I pay them money, and it works, I get my refund. And how can we reduce the discussion to that?
The heck?
Well, I'm over withheld, I'm sorry. So I think, what you're saying today is proof that we're so close. So what can we all do to be the voice of, let's just turn the corner and do it already?
You want to go first?
Yes, oh, please.
Go for it. Oh, you mean? Go ahead,
Oh,
sir.
well,
Yeah.
I thought you were asking him.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the end of the day, right? So what do we do in HealthVault? So in HealthVault, what direct looks like is I have a password and a username and a password, and one of the tabs in the HealthVault interface is my message center, and there's a little thing that says, here's your address, give it to your doctor. And a lot of stuff happens under the covers. We create you a certificate, and we do all kinds of junk like that. But there's no question that that's where this has to be in order for us to be effective in getting adoption from people. There's a tiny minority of people who want to deal with that work, and 90 million% of the rest of us who don't, including me. And so I think at the end of the day, what comes out of all of those diagrams and all of that pain is a user, whether they're a doctor or a patient, can look at a service and see a logo that says check or not check. And from that point on, it's under the covers for them. And I think that we did, in every way, try to design Direct so that that was implementable. And in some of the places, we've been able to do it that way. Certainly MedPlus, Care 360 has done it that way. The Cryptic Services has done it that way. And I think that it's really a matter of getting those logos into a position where people can say, oh, when I see that, I do trust it. And unfortunately, that involves some ugly games.
Yeah, I'd like to address that from the perspective of physicians and other providers, their staffs, hospitals and their staffs using Direct. We've done an experiment in the American Academy of Family Physicians, which was a complete and utter failure. About a year ago, we started AAFP Physicians Direct and offered very low-cost direct accounts via a web portal to physicians, and almost nobody signed up. And the reason was that they said, look, if you'll build this into the electronic health record, we'll use it. I think the analogy here that is pertinent is that 6 or 7 years ago, most electronic health record programs did not have e-prescribing integrated into them. If you wanted to do e-prescribing, you went to a website or you had a handheld device. It took federal subsidies and incentive monies. It took regulations, and it took physician champions in a lot of different organizations to say, no, we're going to make the e-prescribing application an integral part of a module within the electronic health records. And of course, now it's one of the things that they have to have to be able to certify. So my guess is that the great majority of physicians in this country, medical practices and hospitals, will start to use Direct when their electronic health record vendor says, possibly as a result of certifying requirements, here's your module for doing Direct. It's just like email. We're going to handle all the stuff in the background for security and trust. And they'll say, great, just don't charge me too much money for it and we'll start using it.
Yeah. In fact, actually, just to add on that, one of the most interesting and successful implementations I've seen, the physician never even knows Direct is happening. Basically, when a visit closes, if there is a address associated with that patient, they get that visit summary automatically, right? And so you'll see those kinds of workflow integrations that will make it really matter. And it's not about just being an email thing. It's about being an integrated set of flows.
Yeah, I think stage 2 meaningful use is very, very powerful here in moving this. In just the last few weeks, we've seen several electronic health record companies declare that they're going to integrate Direct into their applications in the next go-round.
Real quickly, I have a quick question for Sean. Could you just digress for a second about the new O'Reilly title on the programmable self and its relation to HealthVault?
Oh, absolutely. This is really exciting. It's our first book. I actually bought a copy for everybody on the team. One of the things that we've really, the premises behind HealthVault is that that our health lives are far more about what happens at our home and our gym and our school and those things than it is about what happens in a doctor's office. And as such, from the very beginning, we've really tried to integrate devices that people can actually use and wear and self-measure, and then integrate that information with the other parts of their health lives so that they can have a more holistic picture. And we've seen some incredibly great clinical results out of people where they've created population management programs using some of these small, low-cost, off-the-shelf kind of devices. But what's really happened neat is a guy named Vaibhav Bhandari, who was on our team for years and years and years, really has become part of what sort of people have been calling this quantified self model, which is how can we actually take some of that data and actually learn stuff about it ourselves and actually manage it ourselves, not only within the bounds of clinical providers. And the book has been really cool because it provides a really easy way for people to get started in sort of tracking these and finding patterns. I always tell the story about when I came back to Microsoft after many years away, came back to start this team. And Microsoft very famously has free soda. And as you can see, I have this with me. And I went from drinking 0 of these every workday to about 20, seriously. I'm a very obsessive personality.